Yeah.
Like where there's like the double oak tree?
You can see on here that, actually, James, can you use your finger?
So basically like
So you see right where there's a gravel plant just above his finger now?
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a scar on the mountain. And then basically just near that gravel plant where the highway comes back together is that little long thin triangle. There's a power line at the end of it. So don't get blown back because the power line is at the far end.
Both ends, isn't it? There's one at both ends.
There might be one at both ends.
Yeah.
I don't know about the one at the south end though, because I don't think it crosses. The one at the behind you crosses, where the one in front might just run parallel, because I did overshoot that LZ intentionally one day because the wind was coming south and I ended up landing down on a side road down there when I sunk out there. But this is another one, like the triangle, like that's why it's a fun flight to do in spring, but like especially for newer pilots, like this isn't something that shouldn't be your first XC. Like your first XC should be the bridle lap, you know? At Woodside, your first XC should be like go over the back and go to Harvest Market, go over the back, maybe go over to Green Hill, if it's, or go to Agassiz Mountain and Bear if it's not too windy. At this time of year, it's getting a little harder to find days like that, you know? And this is something like if you're curious about what you should do that day, right? Like given the weather conditions or something, if we're riding up, like I can give you an idea of what I would suggest. So you say, hey, this is where I'm at, this is what I've done, you know? So feel free to ask me that, because I spend enough time thinking about that it won't take me long to give you some idea of what you could probably do.
one of the really cool things here is you'll notice Alex's track logs go basically straight into a thermal. And you can see that he's actually cored it immediately. So a good pilot should be able to core a thermal within, you know, what, 3 or 4 turns kind of thing?
It's actually ridiculous because you watch mine, it looks okay, but like you watch Kriegel's or like the top PWC pods, it's like they glide to like a 5-meter climb. They climb in 5 meters and then they glide to the next one. It's like,
I think I thermal well, but I'm like, oh, I had a good day. I look at my KMC track and it's like,
Yeah, and often you spend that time hunting around, like, oh, there's some lift, there's some over there, and you find it, and eventually you hopefully get up in it.
it's definitely the mark of just doing it a lot. You know, you spend, and also I think it is one of the advantages of flying a glider that's a little bit higher aspect ratio. You get a bit more information from the glider, right? Like if people, like I'm actually a big fan of people flying safe gliders, but if someone holds himself back, like if they're like flying pretty well, they've done their SIV, but they're still flying a low B, like Martin Henry, I'm like, I don't think he's doing himself any favors. He should be on a Swift, right? I like to talk about Martin when he's not here because it'll annoy him.
he would appreciate it.
Yeah. Martin is actually one of my mentors, you know, because I was a young hang glider pilot when Martin was you know, already a very experienced hang glider pilot. So I learned a lot from Martin. I learned the launch early, get the hell off the hill. Everyone else would be sitting around talking on the hill, and Martin would get an hour of airtime, where all these other guys would be just talking about, oh, I did this, I did that. You're not doing anything. You're on the hill.
What are you flying?
Right now it's a Sigma 10. But I think flying a glider that gives you enough information and keeps you interested is useful. If you fly a glider that like you think is a tub of washing and you don't really enjoy, I think it's going to give you less ability to feel things and less connection. Like Tom, you just stepped up from a Buzz to a Swift, and I think that's gone well for you.
Yeah, Swift was great. Really made a lot of difference in my comfort.
And you're still comfortable, right?
Oh yeah.
Alex, that's quite a crux move.
This is the crux move.
Yeah,
This next one, okay?
Yeah.
And I've seen a couple ways to approach it. Which way do you find works well in the typical southwest wind?
Ideally, well, once again, it pretty much has to be April or May. I don't know if I've ever done one of these flights later than that.
Okay.
One, because the valley doesn't work. I almost always need a climb in the middle of the valley. And I also arrive, sometimes I'll arrive below the South Knoll where I need to go into Riverside, or maybe even not even make Riverside. I arrived there at like 200 meters once and I couldn't get to Riverside and I got out. Like I got, you know, I basically over the highway, like Riverside's way over there, and I came in just over the highway and I climbed up. But I wouldn't have done that if the river hadn't been low.
one approach that I think that some people have tried and I've kind of felt it a bit is actually following the river and getting some of the
Yes.
wind coming up the sandbars is a liftier line.
I'll show you
Does
on.
that work well?
Yeah, I'll show you on Google Maps, because I think on Google Maps we'll be able to see the.
So you can download your IGC file from X contest or whatever you use. You just drag and drop it. And then it puts up.
It's just like a desktop app, or is it?
It's just a, it's not even yeah. So it's like a page, create the scene, and you literally just drag and drop the files. 2 seconds.
So, Mike, when I leave, there's also a chunk of airspace. There's a little triangle of airspace, by the way, that sticks out here. It's 5,500 feet instead of 6,500 feet, and it goes almost all the way to the Highway 9 and then back. I'll actually show you maybe the airspace viewer, and you can see that a little bit. It's a discussion unto itself. In fact, actually, you know what we could do is we could put together some links and like put them online, and I can give you some of my paragliding resources for, like, you know, everything from the airspace viewing and the weather. There's some of the basic ones for around here, and we can put that up later for people.
I would love to actually make a compilation of Mike. You sent that your resource page, right?
Yeah.
Which one? Like, I have so much information.
Yeah. It's basically, whenever a pilot shows up to a new site
Oh, yeah,
or
that
new
one.
area,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, who and what and where and why, and it's like you send them this stuff, and everything's there, or almost everything. Might not be accurate, but it's a good place to start.
Yeah, no, it's, yeah.
Not even that.
But
Yeah.
just to finish off that the flight around the valley. So here's Gloria, and here's Elk. You don't usually get as high as Elk.
Yes, that's right.
Usually in a southwest wind, though, if you can get really high here, it's a bit of a challenge, because if you get too high, you'll blip airspace as you cross. But usually by the time you get to the airspace, you're not too high anymore. So if you can get high at Elk or Gloria, that's where I usually leave from. I'm watching my airspace so I don't go over 55 when I hit it.
Why would you not choose Shem? Because it's a bigger thing to get you
Yeah,
higher.
I have done it there, and by going from Sham, you can actually avoid that 5,500, although you're going to go into the 65 at some point. But that's more upwind,
Yes.
right, in a normal day, right? The advantage to that, though, is that if you don't make it, you can land at Harvest, or you can land at the dike over here.
That's typically where you end
Yeah.
up landing.
But also with this route, if you go from Gloria or if you go from Woodside, and your car's back at Woodside, you can glide across here, and you really basically need another climb. If you realize you're really not getting it, because it's downwind, even from here, you can usually glide over to here, and that makes the retrieve way easier. Right? If you glide and you land at Harvest Market, you're almost no problem getting back to your car, right? If you land right here, it's a bit of a pain. Yeah.
We had somebody landing on the sandbar.
Nicole landed on a sandbar with Matt Jessen. We actually we were doing something late. We flew from BJ, and I actually top landed Woodside from BJ. We crossed the river, and I was ahead of them, and I look back and I see Nicole and Matt Jessen's shadow on the river, and I'm like, I can see your shadow on the river. If you're not going to cross it, land on that frickin' sandbar. And all of a sudden, both her and Matt turned around and landed on the sandbar. Wow. Yeah, they were like in sync at the decision point, and I just came on the radio, like, you know, the annoying voice from above to tell them probably what they were about to do.
How do you found
Like the voice of
climbs
God.
across that
Land
valley,
to
the no
the
man's
sandbar.
land, kind of consistently there?
Well, actually, I'll show you where I find the thermals. Many times, there's this long, weird, low mountain here with a tower on the other side, and there's a golf course behind it. I don't know if it's got some conical hill convergence, or maybe it's just because it's more lee side and protected in here. But many times in spring, I've been gliding across here, getting not much, right? Maybe a couple things that are almost not worth turning in, that kind of stuff, and then I find something here. I would say like at least 3 or 4 times, Mike, I found something just in the lee of this mountain. Yeah.
Okay.
The other place I found it this spring was on this river, because I think they've cut all the trees off of here.
Okay.
And changes from water to like, and this was open kind of sand, and in summer I don't think it would work as well, because the marine air and that would be stronger, but it wasn't really much wind. But just the fact that it was kind of triggering, I think, off the river. Because if you have hot air and it's like on a field, this happens in Australia all the time. Like if you've got hot air on a field and there's a water body behind there and it pushes that hot air onto the water, it just releases because it's like, well, that's it. I got all the hot air I can, and up she goes. So they actually often find in the flats that are around water, everyone thinks, oh, water's sink, I'm going to stay as far away as possible. Actually, a lot of times I found myself climbing over the middle of a big pond in
You
Australia.
know, Bulgaria is the famous spot. Remember
Yeah.
flying? You've been
I
to
haven't been to
Sopot.
Sopot, no.
Anyhow, the whole competition is in the lee side,
Yeah.
and the strongest, most powerful thermals are on the lee side edges that break off, like from
Yeah.
something contrasting, basically. Yeah. And water works every single time. It's not much of a water. It's not lakes. They're
Yeah,
like
yeah.
ponds or whatever.
Yeah, just for agriculture or something.
But they're triggers like.
Alex, do you use the halves or the thirds rule where if you're low enough, you're looking at the ground, you're looking at what the ground's going to be doing.
Yeah.
If you're high enough, you're
Absolutely.
looking at the clouds, you're looking at, so you're going to fly those different routes.
Yeah.
How do you know what's kicking off?
Yes.
You're either reading the clouds or you're reading the ground, depending on how high you go.
Yeah.
The way that rule was first described to me from hang gliding in Chelan was when you're low, you fly the ground. When you're high, you fly the sky, right? And I see people like they're like way up there, and they're like, oh, I think it's triggering from those bushes down there. I'm like, with that much wind, and when it's 4,000
gives a
feet
damn?
below you, you're not going to know where it's drifted to.
Well, that's what I was trying to figure out bridle. I'm like, I think okay, there's a big patch of really obvious
Yeah.
brown rocks. I'm like, okay, if there's a bit of wind, it should be here.
Yeah.